Hello. Today we visit a r/AskReddit post to ask what is a part of history that we consider to be a fact but is 100% fake. Make sure to comment your opinion down below or any fake history facts I may have missed. With that, sit back and enjoy. A Stegosaurus fighting a T-Rex. They lived millions of years apart. The Stegosaurus lived 144 million years ago, while the T-Rex lived 65 million years ago. Insane difference. Still, almost every dinosaur-related media places them together. Einstein never failed math. The rumor started from Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Einstein actually responded to them saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15 I had mastered differential and integral calculus." He wasn't very good at the non-science related classes though and did fail French. I'm so confused about Einstein and Ripley's Believe It or Not existing at the same time. Well, Einstein died in 1955. He saw Looney Tunes cartoons and probably heard rock and roll. You think that is freaky? There was a 22-year window in which a samurai could have sent a fax to Abraham Lincoln. That Hitler was a raging, shouting maniac in person. I think we want to believe that he would be that way because the idea that someone who was polite and low-key could be so evil is really disturbing. According to his personal secretary and many people who knew him, Hitler rarely showed anger and was subdued but friendly in private. Trottel Junge was there during the incident that inspired the scene in the movie Downfall that became a meme, and she said that she was completely shocked to hear Hitler raise his voice. She had worked for him for over 2 years. I think that's mainly due to his speeches and the clips of him clearly on amphetamines. You would think that because most of the time you see a Hitler speech, you are getting a short clip of the end of the speech. He was a very gifted and very theatrical speaker. His intent was to provoke emotion in the crowd, and he would work up to the dramatic parts. If you watch the whole thing, and understand the language, you see the whole effect he is working up to. You only see the last 2 minutes and he looks like a raving lunatic. He also got an acting and speaking coach after the beer hall putsch. Those speeches are planned for effect and he was trained to do them. Ninjas dressed in all black to stay stealthy in the night or something like that. Ninjas dressed like normal people to blend in. The all-black look stemmed from Japanese theater to make it more obvious to the audience who the ninjas were. If they wore all black it'd be quite obvious and they'd stick out like a sore thumb. Edit. Most of you pointed out it also came from stagehands. That makes a lot of sense too. Of course they didn't wear all black. There were red, white, blue and later even green ninjas. Wasn't it that the all-black look was worn by the people moving the props in Japanese theater? And then in some plays there was a twist that one of those prop holders attacked the protagonist? That's what I was led to believe. Because they were unseen, people mistake ninjas wearing that when they were in reality unseen. Because they blended in with people wearing normal things, not the background of a stage production. Also, shuriken got used less as actual weapons and more like a dangerous distraction. And while we're at it, samurai weren't particularly honorable and fought mostly with bows and spears, with katanas only being the third weapon of choice. Or like, guns. I read the Book of 5 Rings as a teenager while in a samurai movie phase, which is kinda a manual for samurai from the 1600s. It encourages carrying a flintlock pistol or two so you can just shoot people without having to fight them. General public not being aware that classical Greece and Rome had colored paints all over those statues, much less colored dyes in their clothes. Edit. Point being, we tend to believe that there was a lot of white in the classical period, which isn't actually the case. The traditional image of Socrates lecturing in a white toga is all wrong. It should actually be tie-dyed. Now I imagine Socrates looking all hippie-like with a ponytail, round glasses and tie-dyed togas. I'm telling you man, the only true wisdom is like, in knowing you know nothing dude. Related to Rome, gladiators used to advertise for local blacksmiths who provided them armor and weapons. Ridley Scott intended to portray this in Gladiator, but left it out because he felt people wouldn't believe it. The Chinese terracotta army was also originally painted. Yep, upon unearthing them it destroyed the paint almost immediately. What's crazy is that it's only one of many still buried pits that surround Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. The mausoleum itself is underground and looks like a big hill since it's a pyramid. Until foolproof methods for preservation are figured out it'll likely remain unexcavated. But there's something of a debate because it's in a region with high seismic activity, and by leaving it as is, there's a risk everything could be destroyed by an earthquake. So, it may be better to take the risk of losing some preservation to save the whole and add that knowledge. The Boston Tea Party didn't have some grand celebration. A lot of the colonists were confused and it's recorded as one of Boston's most quiet nights. There were so many Loyalists throughout the American Revolution. The Sons of Liberty were a small group of complete radicals that roped the entirety of colonial America, for lack of a better term, into a war that many of them did not really support. In AP US history they told us a third wanted independence, a third were Loyalists, and the rest didn't care. That's true for many revolutions. Most people just don't care. It also is a lesson of how even a minority can seize power and make the rest of the people go along with it. Of course plenty of other things were happening. The revolution benefited most colonists. The Irish famine wasn't just a natural disaster. There was plenty of food in Ireland, it was just exported to Britain. Our staple food for most people was the potato, so the failure of the crop was devastating. However, yes, there was so much food being grown here that was exported. We were also as a people given the option to have food if we denounced our religion, leading to a phrase, taking the soup. To take the soup was to denounce Catholicism and become Protestant. The potato was the staple crop because the Irish peasants had been reduced to just tenants, not even peasants. Peasants can't be thrown off their land, tenants can. So they grew wheat and the like for export, and on their own plots were allowed to grow potatoes, the only thing that they could grow that would sustain them on the small plots they had for themselves. The day you can't pay rent to your landlord, they'd throw you off the land and you'd be doomed. So when the blight came, it killed the only thing they could afford to eat, and they had no money to buy anything else. It was a genocide, engineered by the British. They have done the same thing many times. The lady who sued McDonald's didn't do so frivolously. She received third-degree burns from how hot that coffee was, and needed a skin graft. It was quickly found that that location was keeping the coffee well above the temperature you can legally serve a hot drink in a cup at. The fact that most people think this suit was over the temperature of the coffee, and not the debilitating burns that woman received, is one of the PR world's greatest triumphs. You are not immune to propaganda. It was actually found that McDonald's had all of their locations keeping coffee temps too hot. Multiple reports of burns were placed before the Maine incident and were just settled out of court and ignored by the corp. The poor woman just wanted enough money to cover her medical bills and nothing more originally. There is a joke saying that Austria's greatest success is making everyone believe that Mozart was Austrian and Hitler was German. Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake." Although as I recall weren't her last words actually an apology to her executioner for tripping over his foot. Yep. Then he chopped off her hair to sell as souvenirs. Carrots are good for eye health, but won't improve your eyesight. Nevertheless, people have been telling me all my life I should eat carrots to see better. The reason people think that is during World War II the Royal Air Force had this new radar system and they didn't want the Germans to know about it, so they spread the rumor that the reason their pilots could find their planes so fast was that they ate carrots. Carrots are good for your eyes. Ever seen a rabbit with glasses? Okay. This is double funny in this thread because the only reason people think rabbits regularly eat carrots is due to Bugs Bunny cartoons. Bugs Bunny is also the reason Nimrod is now used as an insult. He sarcastically called Elmer Fudd Nimrod, a mighty hunter in the Bible. Paul Revere did not run around Massachusetts shouting, "The British are coming," because if he did everyone would look at him like he'd lost his mind. Almost everyone in the colonies was British. He actually said, "The regulars are coming." The lore I was taught growing up was that, "The redcoats are coming." He also only carried that message for a small stretch of the ride. There were about a half-dozen messengers passing it along. We remember Paul Revere as the only rider because, no joke, his name fit best in Longfellow's poem. That people used swords and axes all the time. Spears. It's spears, most of human history has been spears. Vikings used spears, samurai and knights used spears. Hell, bayonets exist because people felt you always need a spear, even with a rifle in your hand. William Blake said, "When the stars threw down their spears, and watered heaven with their tears." Quote, "Which is stupid. No one throws down their spear. Spears are great for poking people to death. Combat is all about hitting a person without being hit yourself. It's why we have been developing stuff to hit each other from further and further away. A sniper rifle is just like a really long spear. The invention of archery was based on, I really want to stab that guy, but he's all the way over there. That historically people, especially the peasant class of medieval Europe, stank. This is born of two factoids. Firstly, that people very rarely if ever had baths, and secondly that people rarely if ever washed their clothes. Both are kind of true but misleading and with massive caveats. First, bathing. Think of the amount of work involved in preparing a bath in the days before hot running water. You go to the well, get a bucket of water, lug it back across the village to your house, put it in a pan over the fire to heat it up. That's one bucket. You'd have to do that half a dozen times at least. Even if you've got servants to do all the actual work, it would take a lot of servants a lot of time to get you a bath ready. But that doesn't mean people didn't wash. Most people washed daily using a basin of water and a cloth, basically a sponge bath. Soap made of animal fat and ash has been around for thousands of years and is pretty effective at lifting dirt off the skin. As any one of us who's had to sponge bathe for a while, e.g. after a surgery will know, it may not be ideal, but it gets the job done. Films generally portray peasant with smudges of dirt all over the face, but that's just lazy costuming. And now the clothes. True, the outer layers, the layers that we see, were very rarely washed because most people only owned one set, and they could be very difficult to wash effectively, but you have to remember people, even peasants, wore a lot of layers, so that the layer we see was really the equivalent of a coat, and was never really against the wearer's skin gathering sweat. How often do you wash your outer coat? For people in roles where external dirt was very likely to get onto the clothes, aprons and other easily removable garments were used. The layers worn right against the skin, a full dress like smock for women and a long shirt for men, long enough to tuck around the genitals and butt and also do the job of underpants, were changed and washed as often as possible, because they were the layers that got the body sweat etc. on them. They were made more simply and usually of cheap, hardy fabrics specifically designed for easy laundering. TLDR. Medieval peasant were not filthy and stinking. They washed their clothes and bodies as best they could. It should be noted though, that although the people were not as dirty as sometimes portrayed, the stench of cities is well documented to be so vile as to cause sickness and fainting. London in particular was disgusting. Close cramped housing, with sewage in the open, and animals being commonplace led to a pretty horrific atmosphere. I originally studied law at university. In my first year we did a History of Law module. We had a guest speaker once whose occupation was to create copy smells. He brought with him a sample smell of what London smelled like around the time of the plague. He pre-warned the lecture theatre that it was going to be bad, but my God, this is the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life, and I've done skin decomposition study at one point. He had this tiny glass vial of the stench and put it on a tissue at the front of the theatre. We lasted all of 5 minutes before most people left the lecture. Felt like I could still smell it for a good hour after too. TLDR, the people might not have been filthy, but the cities were repulsive. So many people completely misunderstood pre-industrial lifespans. The average age of death was 30. Not because our bodies wore out faster, but because of how averages are calculated. A lot of people died as children. A much larger chunk of the population died in wars. If you got in an accident, healing without modern medicine was difficult. But for people who reached adulthood, and then avoided violence, injury, and plague, living to be 60 or 70 was pretty normal. With that, thank you for watching all the way until the end, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your opinion down below or any history facts I may have missed. If you want to continue to watch my content, click one of the videos above. Until next time.